The hush that fell over Le Papillon, one of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurants, was deafening. Waiters froze mid-step diners, set down their forks, and the pianist stopped playing mid-note. All eyes turned to the corner table where an impeccably dressed billionaire glared at the trembling waitress. His booming voice cut through the air, demanding perfection, belittling her efforts and seething with impatience. No one dared speak up, until the waitress looked him dead in the eye. A single sentence slipped from her lips, words so unexpected, so arresting, that they seemed to halt time itself. In that moment, lives would forever change. Sophia Jenkins had never been the type to seek out drama. She was 28, juggling 2 jobs, a mountain of student loan debt, and a spirited 7-year-old daughter named Kiki, who constantly begged for dance lessons. But this was life in New York City. When Sophia was offered a part-time position at Le Papillon, a Michelin-starred establishment perched in the heart of Manhattan, she leaped at the chance. The tips alone could keep her afloat in a city where money flowed in torrents, but rarely settled among the working class. Nestled on the upper floor of an elegant pre-war building, Le Papillon was known for its French-Asian fusion menu and an unspoken dress code that turned away even the slightest breach of formality. The staff wore crisp black and white uniforms with embroidered lapels, and each employee was trained to an impeccable standard. Head chef Corinne Lemaire had once worked under a renowned chef in Paris, and rumor had it that celebrities like Beyoncé and even Bill Gates had stopped in for discreet meals. The pressure that came with such clientele was extraordinary, yet Sophia believed the job was worth it. The pay was decent, the tips potentially life-changing, and the environment polished. As a single mother with unstoppable determination, she braced herself for the challenge. Each day, Sophia arrived 2 hours before her shift to help set up meticulously, aligning silverware, wiping down wine glasses until they shone like diamonds under the chandeliers, and memorizing every nuance of the day's menu. She learned that if the chef de cuisine was in a sour mood, the staff had to be 2 steps ahead of any requests. If the sommelier had a special recommendation, they had to be ready to describe it flawlessly. Everything mattered: how you walked, how you held a plate, how you spoke to each diner. She was exhausted, but oddly satisfied at the end of every shift. Something about delivering a perfect service invigorated her. She likened it to a dance routine, every step and gesture choreographed, every phrase of speech practiced, every smile genuine yet carefully measured. Within weeks, Sophia found her stride. She charmed couples, celebrating anniversaries, corporate groups, toasting deals, and wealthy out-of-towners wanting a taste of luxury. She was thrilled when her first big tip arrived, a neat $200 from a hedge fund manager who appreciated her knowledge of vintage Bordeaux. That tip went straight into Kiki's Dance Dreams piggy bank. Outside of the restaurant, Sophia's world was decidedly more modest. Her tiny queen's apartment was a Kiki 1-bedroom, where Kiki slept in a corner, partitioned off by a lavender curtain. The living room doubled as the dining space, and the kitchen was barely big enough to spin around in. Yet they made the most of it, filling each corner with drawings of princesses and pictures of exotic places they planned to visit one day. Despite the challenges, Sophia was determined to provide her daughter with a life that stretched beyond meager paychecks and cramped quarters. This new job at Le Papillon felt like a step in the right direction. So when she clocked in that fateful Saturday evening, she had no idea that her life was about to change. It was a busy night, reservations fully booked with what the maitre d' described as influential figures. This usually meant CEOs, high-profile attorneys, or maybe even a celebrity under a baseball cap. The entire staff was on high alert, as rumors were swirling that a notable billionaire might make an appearance. Chef Lemaire fretted in the kitchen, triple-checking fresh ingredients flown in from across the globe. The sous chefs prepped dishes with a precision that bordered on surgical. That was the night Ethan Caldwell strode through the doors of Le Papillon. Known in the media as a reclusive billionaire who rarely granted interviews, Ethan had amassed his fortune in technology, specifically advanced predictive software that governments and corporations coveted. He held the patent for a groundbreaking algorithm used in everything from stock market analysis to facial recognition. Tabloids had a field day whenever he was spotted reporting on everything from his choice of suits to the mysterious women occasionally seen at his side. Some called him the next Jeff Bezos, others the new Steve Jobs. Many described him as brilliant, yet ruthless a man who allegedly valued his time and money above human decency. But to the staff of Le Papillon, he was simply Table 9 tonight. And that was all that should matter, at least according to the restaurant's code of conduct. Sophia, having studied the seating chart, knew he was the last-minute VIP addition, the kind who might drop 4 figures on a bottle of wine without blinking. She wasn't assigned to serve Table 9 at first, but fate has a funny way of intervening. Chapter 2. A tense encounter approx. 800 words. The restaurant buzzed like a hive on the brink of chaos. Waiters circled the dining floor like choreographed dancers, swift, silent, and efficient. Every seat was filled. The clink of glasses, the rustle of napkins, and the quiet hum of polite conversation intermingled with the subdued notes of live piano music. Sophia's section for the night was originally Tables 5, 4, 6, and 7, none of them especially important. Table 5 was a couple celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Table 6 was occupied by a solitary diner who was more interested in reading his thick biography of Winston Churchill than in socializing. Table 7 was a small group of art dealers politely discussing an upcoming auction. Sophia had just successfully delivered amuse-bouche, a trio of delicate canapés, to each table without incident. So far, so good. Then came the surprise. Julian, the waiter assigned to Table 9, slipped in the kitchen. It happened so fast. He was carrying a tray of champagne flutes, headed for the VIP section, when a stray garnish of microgreens fell to the floor, causing him to lose his footing. Julian tumbled, flutes and champagne crashing in a spectacular sparkling arc. He twisted his ankle badly. The maitre d' rushed in, anxious and pale, while Chef Lemaire let out an audible gasp from behind the pass. In that frantic moment, the maitre d' scanned the restaurant for a suitable replacement. Another server had just started her break. Another was bogged down with a 12 top in the opposite corner. His gaze landed on Sophia. "Sophia," he said quickly, "you're up." She blinked, heart pounding. She was nervous, but the unspoken rule at Le Papillon was unyielding. You never question an order, especially in front of guests. She nodded curtly, found an open tray, and prepared herself to serve Ethan Caldwell, reclusive billionaire, rumored to be as demanding as he was powerful. Taking a deep breath, she approached Table 9. Ethan Caldwell was no older than 45, tall and broad-shouldered with neatly styled salt and pepper hair. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit with a subtle pinstripe that probably cost more than a year of Sophia's rent. His wrist sported a watch that gleamed with understated opulence, something Swiss, no doubt. Next to him sat a business associate, slighter in build, equally well-dressed, whose name Sophia would later learn was Aaron Welsh. Surrounding them were 2 bodyguards seated at separate tables, attempting to be inconspicuous, but failing miserably given their matching black suits and earpieces. Sophia approached, posture-aligned, eyes calm. A faint smile etched on her lips. "Good evening," she said, voice steady. "Welcome to Le Papillon. My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with our signature cocktails, or would you prefer to see the wine list?" Ethan glanced at her, barely acknowledging her presence. She could see the flicker of annoyance in his steel-grey eyes, presumably due to the minor commotion with the champagne fiasco. Aaron Welsh offered a polite smile, but Ethan said nothing. "Wine list," he muttered. "Make it quick, and if you have a good vintage of Riesling, bring that." He didn't look up from his phone fingers flying across the screen. Sophia nodded and hurried to fetch the wine list, ignoring the knot forming in her stomach. She reminded herself that as a server, her job was to remain calm, professional, and gracious no matter who sat at the table. This was the unwritten credo she and her colleagues lived by daily. Be invisible when needed, be supportive when invited, and always maintain composure. She took a mental note to check the cellar for the recommended Riesling that Chef Lemaire had raved about. Perhaps it might please him and brighten his mood. Returning to table 9, she carefully offered the list. "We have an excellent Riesling from the Mosel Valley," she suggested in her best polite tone. "It's a 2001 vintage, quite rare, with notes of peach apricot and a mineral finish. Head chef Corinne Lemaire speaks highly of it. I think it would pair beautifully with tonight's specials." Ethan paused, then tossed the wine list aside as if it were a distraction. He hadn't once made direct eye contact yet. "Fine. Bring it," he snapped. "But let's not waste time with the cheap stuff. I can pay for quality." Sophia nodded, forced a mild smile, and stepped away. In the brief moment she spent fetching the bottle and retrieving the correct glassware, she felt a pang of anxiety. There was nothing unusual about demanding guests, some even borderline hostile. But there was an aura around Ethan Caldwell, an electricity in the air that made her uneasy. Perhaps it was his wealth or the swirl of rumors about his intimidating personality, or maybe just the fact that she was new to serving high-profile clients at Le Papillon. Either way, she knew one misstep could lead to a nightmarish shift. She meticulously carried out the bottle presentation, showing Ethan the label. He waved it off impatiently, allowing her to pour a small sample. He took a sip, pursed his lips, and nodded curtly. So far, so good. When she attempted to describe the evening's specials, though he cut her off mid-sentence. "Stop wasting my time with pleasantries," he said sharply. "Can we just order? I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Bring me the Wagyu beef seared rare black garlic sauce on the side. No garnish and a side of truffle mashed potatoes. Make it happen quickly." Her heart quickened. Le Papillon prided itself on elegant plating, all meticulously arranged with garnishes and accompaniments. But she had no choice. "Of course, sir," she said, keeping her face neutral. Turning to Aaron Welsh, she politely inquired what he'd like to order. He looked deeply uncomfortable, as though he disliked the tension, but was used to following Ethan's lead. He ordered a bouillabaisse and politely thanked her. As Sophia disappeared into the kitchen to place their orders, she felt the tension throbbing in her chest. Other staff members whispered about the scene at table 9. Chef Lemaire was particularly anxious personally tending to Ethan Caldwell's meal, wanting to ensure that if this rumored billionaire ever decided to invest in a new gastronomic venture, Le Papillon would be the first on his list. Unbeknownst to her, the real drama was only just beginning. While Ethan Caldwell sipped his prized Riesling, the rest of Le Papillon's dining room remained a swirl of refined activity. Waiters delicately balanced silver-domed trays, The pianist's melodic tunes floated on the air, and well-heeled patrons murmured amongst themselves, yet there was an undercurrent of tension creeping outward from table 9 like ripples on a pond. Sophia was busy checking on her other tables. She refilled a glass of champagne for the anniversary couple, answered a question about sauce pairings for the art dealers, and politely asked the solo diner if he'd like dessert. Despite juggling multiple requests, she couldn't escape the looming sense of dread. She knew she would have to return to Ethan Caldwell's table soon, and her stomach twisted at the thought. When Chef Lemaire rang the bell indicating that table 9's dishes were ready, Sophia quickly gathered the plates with practiced efficiency. The Wagyu beef glistened expertly, seared with the black garlic sauce in a small ramekin on the side. The truffle mashed potatoes were piped elegantly, though the garnish had been omitted as requested. Chef Lemaire had not been pleased, but Ethan's demands were absolute. Beside that sat the bouillabaisse fragrant with saffron tomatoes and delicate pieces of shellfish. Sophia emerged from the kitchen and made her way through the tables, head held high. As she arrived at table 9, she gently placed the Wagyu before Ethan, then set down the bouillabaisse in front of Aaron Welsh. "I hope you enjoy your meal," she said softly, stepping back to maintain the polite distance required. For a few minutes, Ethan picked up his cutlery and began to eat, ignoring Sophia entirely. She half expected him to bark some complaint about temperature or presentation, but to her surprise, he seemed too absorbed in his own thoughts to speak. Instead, she watched Aaron's discreet nod, acknowledging the quality of the bouillabaisse, and felt slightly relieved. But just when she thought she might skate through the service unscathed, Ethan's face hardened. He set down his fork, leaned back in his chair, and pushed the plate away in an abrupt gesture. "Waitress," he barked, looking directly at Sophia for the first time. Her heart lurched at his commanding tone, but she approached maintaining a calm demeanor. "Yes, sir," she answered, trying not to let her apprehension show. Ethan gestured to the steak, his expression stormy. "This is raw," he snarled. "I asked for rare, not raw. Are you trying to give me food poisoning or something?" Sophia swallowed hard. She knew for a fact that Chef Lemaire's cooking was impeccable. The internal temperature of that Wagyu would have been precisely what Ethan had asked for. But a server never argues in front of a guest. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir," she said, voice measured. "I can have it taken back to the kitchen and cooked further to your liking." He let out a mirthless laugh loud enough to turn a few heads at nearby tables. "Cooked further, I shouldn't have to repeat myself. This place is supposed to be top tier. You should know how to serve a steak properly." Sophia breathed in and out, steady. She reminded herself of little Kiki back home, of the rent that needed paying, of the tips she relied on. "I understand," she said softly. "Let me fix this for you immediately, Chef Lemaire." "Well, I don't want excuses," Ethan snapped. "I want solutions, now. And while you're at it, bring another bottle of that Riesling. And hurry." Aaron Welsh glanced at Sophia apologetically, but he said nothing. The tension in the dining area thickened. Nearby patrons shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to keep watching or pretend they hadn't noticed. Sophia felt her cheeks flush, but kept her posture poised. "Yes, sir," she said, lifting the plate and turning to leave. Only then did the billionaire raise his voice to address the rest of the restaurant. "For a place like this to mess up a simple steak is ridiculous. Do you realize how much money is spent to dine here? You'd think they'd hire competent staff." A hush fell among the diners as Ethan's outburst reverberated against the elegantly paneled walls. Murmurs rose among the crowd. Aaron placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder, trying to calm him, but Ethan shrugged him off. Sophia's ears burned. It was one thing to be berated quietly, but quite another to be humiliated publicly. Her composure slipped for a moment, a flash of hurt crossing her face. However, years of hardship had taught her to remain calm under provocation. She disappeared into the kitchen, asked Chef Lemaire to cook the steak just a tad longer, and retrieved another bottle of Riesling. The chef was furious at Ethan's accusation of rawness and questioned if the man even understood what rare meant. Still, their hands were tied. The customer was always right, especially a billionaire who could make or break reputations. Sophia returned with the updated Wagyu and the new bottle, carefully displaying it for Ethan's approval. He gave no sign of courtesy, merely lifting his glass for a refill as she poured. Tension lines creased his forehead, and his voice dripped with disdain. She set the steak in front of him. "I hope this is to your satisfaction," she said, biting back any edge in her tone. He glowered at her, but cut into the meat. He took a bite, then nodded curtly. Finally, he muttered. Then he added, "You should have done it right the first time." His voice echoed. A few patrons stared openly now, while others pretended to be absorbed in their meals. The pianist continued playing more softly, more hesitantly, trying in vain to maintain the ambience. Ethan's eyes flicked up at Sophia. "Well, what are you waiting for? You can go." She inclined her head and stepped away, feeling her pulse racing. Before she could take more than 3 steps, he barked again. "Waitress?" She froze, turning slowly. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, reading a text, and then glared at Sophia as though she had personally offended him. "Get me the check, now," he ordered, "and get your manager over here." Sophia's stomach sank. This couldn't be good. She hurried to the maitre d', who immediately tensed at the request. Managers rarely appeared tableside unless there was a major issue, and for a VIP like Ethan Caldwell, damage control had to be swift and thorough. The maitre d' smoothed his jacket and joined Sophia approaching table 9 with careful diplomacy. Ethan wasted no time in ranting about how incompetent the service was, how his steak was subpar, and how his time was wasted. The maitre d' tried to placate him, apologizing profusely and promising to remove the Wagyu from the bill. It was then that the dreaded moment happened. Ethan turned to Sophia, face twisted with scorn, and unleashed an insult-laden tirade that rose above the gentle hum of the dining room. "This waitress is clueless," he fumed. "She can't follow simple instructions. She wasted my evening, brought me raw meat, and I'm paying top dollar. Unacceptable. I don't care if she's new or incompetent. People like her shouldn't be allowed in places like this. I've run companies with thousands of employees, and if any one of them performed like she did tonight, I'd have them fired on the spot." The whole restaurant fell silent. A hush blanketed the dining room, as though someone had hit a pause button on life itself. Every pair of eyes fixed on Ethan Caldwell, stunned by the ferocity of his outburst. The chatter of the other tables died away. Forks and knives clattered to a standstill, and even the pianist's fingers froze on the keys. Aaron Welsh was red-faced, staring down at his half-eaten bouillabaisse, clearly wishing he could melt into the floor. Sophia stood rigid, heart pounding in her ears. Her cheeks burned with both humiliation and anger she struggled to keep in check. The entire staff watched as this towering man verbally pummeled her, telling the world she was worthless, incompetent, a nobody. Something inside Sophia cracked. She had spent years turning the other cheek, dealing with condescending customers, who snapped their fingers. Students in her second job as a dance instructor, complaining about fees, even the father of her child who vanished without a trace, leaving her alone to raise Kiki. She had always bottled up her frustrations, swallowing every harsh word and insult, convinced that meek acceptance was the only way to survive. But in this moment, with the entire restaurant gawking at her humiliation, her backbone finally straightened. She lifted her chin, looked Ethan Caldwell square in the eye for the first time that night, and spoke a single sentence that stopped all of Manhattan in its tracks, or so it felt. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." Her voice was calm, but the words cut through the air like a knife. For a moment it seemed as though time itself had halted. The words lingered echoing in the silent dining room. Every person within earshot felt the impact of her statement. A wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Even the maitre d' was stunned into momentary silence. Chef Lemaire, peeking from the kitchen, felt her heart jolt with pride and dread all at once. Ethan Caldwell's expression froze. His eyes widened in anger, and a flush crept up his neck. No one spoke to him like this, especially not a waitress. After a stunned beat, he began to splutter. "What? Did you just say?" Sophia's composure held. Her posture was as straight as an arrow, her gaze unflinching. "I said you can buy a steak, but you can't buy decency," she repeated, her voice echoing the calm resolve of someone who had finally had enough. She expected an immediate explosion from him, but instead, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his reaction. People slowly emerged from their stunned silence. A few tables began clapping tentatively at first. Then one or two bolder voices joined in, until a soft applause spread across the room like a gentle wave. It was a subtle but tangible show of solidarity with the courageous waitress who had dared to speak her truth. Ethan's face contorted with rage. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. The half-eaten steak before him lay forgotten. "How dare you?" he roared. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire restaurant and fire you all. I could ruin your life with a single phone call." Sophia swallowed, her pulse drumming, but she refused to back down. She was no fool. She knew the risk she had taken by speaking out. She might lose her job, the only stable income she had. But in that moment, her self-respect outweighed her fear. "I'm well aware of who you are, Mr. Caldwell," she said quietly, her voice wavering only slightly. "I also know that doesn't give you the right to treat people like they're disposable." The applause grew louder. A few guests rose to their feet, nodding in agreement. A whirlwind of confusion seized the maitre d'. On one hand, he needed to protect the restaurant's reputation from a furious billionaire. On the other, the moral compass of every person in that room had been rattled by Ethan's vicious behavior. The staff exchanged worried glances, uncertain of how to intervene. Ethan Caldwell's breathing was heavy. He jerked his gaze from Sophia to the maitre d' to the onlookers around him, all of whom were either silently watching or openly showing support for the waitress. It was a surreal moment, a standoff between an exceedingly wealthy man and a courageous woman who'd had enough of being trampled upon. "Your manager," Ethan hissed, turning to the maitre d'. Now the maitre d' stepped forward, hands held out in a conciliatory gesture. "Mr. Caldwell, please accept our apologies for any—" Ethan silenced him with a raised hand. "I'm done," he said, his voice seething with anger. "I won't spend another minute here. This is unacceptable. Do you realize what a public relations nightmare this is for me? I'll see to it that this establishment suffers. And you, he snarled at Sophia. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Without waiting for the check, he tossed a wad of cash onto the table, far exceeding the bill apparently, and grabbed his phone. Aaron Welsh quickly scrambled after him, whispering apologies to the stunned staff. The two bodyguards who had stood abruptly when Ethan shouted followed their employer out the door, leaving the entire restaurant in a hushed state of disbelief. Sophia stood rooted to the spot, her entire body shaking from the adrenaline rush. Had she really just done that? The weight of her words hit her, and she wondered if she had gone too far. She might have lost her job. The cost of that rebellious sentence might spell financial disaster. But deep down, an ember of pride glowed in her chest. She'd spoken truth to power, even if it would cost her everything. Chapter 5. After the storm, approx. 800 words. The echo of Ethan Caldwell's threats lingered in the dining room long after he stormed out. People began to whisper to one another, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others stealing glances at Sophia, who remained standing near table 9, the cash scattered across the table like unwanted confetti. It was only then that she realized her eyes were brimming with tears. The stress, the fear, and the triumph of that single moment overwhelmed her. Before she could wipe her eyes, the maitre d' stepped forward, followed closely by Chef Lemaire, who had emerged from the kitchen. "Sophia," he said gently, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "Are you okay?" She swallowed hard and nodded, blinking away the tears. "I'm sorry," she managed. "I don't know what came over me." Chef Lemaire spoke up, her voice tinged with both concern and admiration. "What came over you was the courage to stand up to a bully, chérie. I'm proud of you for speaking your truth. But we have to be prepared for the consequences." Sophia's heart sank. "I understand if you need to let me go," she murmured. I spoke out of turn. I was unprofessional. "Let's not make any rash decisions," the maitre d' interjected. "You did what you felt was right. If Mr. Caldwell makes good on his threats, we'll have to deal with it then. But for now, take a few minutes to collect yourself." One of the bussers stepped up to clear the table, but the maitre d' raised his hand. "No," he said, eyeing the pile of cash Ethan had flung down. "We'll handle that carefully. The check was never finalized." "This is complicated." Sophia, too shaken to deal with the financial logistics of the situation, nodded. I'll step outside for a moment." She made her way to the back exit, escaping into the alley, where the restaurant disposed of its trash. Under the soft glow of a single street lamp, she leaned against the cold brick wall and inhaled the crisp night air. Her mind whirled with 100 questions. How would she pay her bills if she lost this job? What about Kiki's dance lessons? Had she just shattered her future with one impulsive sentence? Yet amidst the swirl of fear, she felt an undeniable relief. For once, she hadn't just swallowed her dignity. She'd stood up for herself, and by proxy, for every server, cashier, receptionist, or sales clerk who had ever been dehumanized by someone wielding wealth as a weapon. She was startled by a gentle voice. Sophia. Turning, she found one of her co-workers, a fellow waitress named Marta, hovering in the doorway. Marta, a kind soul in her early 40s, had been at Le Papillon for years. She offered Sophia a comforting smile. Some of the customers asked for you, Marta said softly. They wanted to thank you for what you did. Thank me, Sophia asked, surprised. But I probably just ruined the restaurant's reputation and my own. Marta shrugged. You said what everyone was thinking. The way he treated you was awful. He was acting like he owned the world. A lot of us have been there dealing with entitled customers. It's refreshing to see someone push back. Sophia exhaled, shaky but somewhat reassured. She gave a small nod. I'll be back in, but I need a minute. Can you let the maitre d' know? Of course, Marta said, with a supportive smile. Then she ducked back inside, leaving Sophia to gather her thoughts in solitude. As she stood there in the crisp air, she thought of Kiki. Her daughter had always looked up to her proud that her mother was a dancer and a hard-working waitress. Sophia tried to imagine explaining her actions to Kiki. Could she say Mommy lost her job because she wouldn't let a mean man talk down to her? A tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away, steeling herself. If she had to start over, she would. But at least she had looked that bully in the eye and refused to let him trample her spirit. Eventually, she returned to the dining room. Though she felt drained and hollow, she put on a professional face to finish her shift. She apologized to the anniversary couple for the disturbance, but they were gracious, telling her she was an inspiration for standing up for herself. The art dealers expressed similar sentiments. Even the solitary diner paused his reading long enough to slip her an extra tip. Word had obviously spread about what had happened. I'm proud of you, one older woman whispered, gripping Sophia's hand as she left. We need more women who speak their minds. Yet for every supportive gesture, there was an undercurrent of tension among the staff. Everyone wondered how the owners would react when they heard about the scene. Would they side with the young waitress who risked the restaurant's good graces with an influential billionaire? Or would they do damage control at her expense? By the end of the night, as the last table was cleared and the doors were locked, Sophia felt emotionally spent. She dragged herself into the staff locker room to change, half expecting the maitre d' to appear and hand her a pink slip. But he never came. Instead, the only person who entered was Chef Lemaire. C'est chérie, she said, gesturing to the small bench against the wall. I wanted to speak with you before you went home. Sophia sank onto the bench, her stomach churning with anxiety. Chef Lemaire sat beside her, a sympathetic expression softening her usually stern features. Sophia, she began. You made quite the impression tonight. Many of our regulars are already telling me how deeply they respect you. And I do too. A lump formed in Sophia's throat. Thank you. That means a lot. But what about Ethan Caldwell? His threats weren't empty. He's one of the wealthiest men in the city. He could ruin Le Papillon's reputation or sue us, or Chef Lemaire nodded gravely. We'll see what happens. For now, management hasn't asked for your resignation, and as far as I know, they're not planning to. In fact, the maitre d' hinted that the owners might want to take a different approach. There's a lot of support for you, more than you might realize. I suggest you go home, rest, and wait to hear from them tomorrow. Relief washed over Sophia, though she couldn't fully relax. Thank you, Chef, she whispered, tears brimming again. The older woman patted her hand. Go home. Hug your daughter. Tomorrow's another day, and we'll face it together if need be. Sophia nodded, packed up her things, and left the restaurant. She hopped on the subway back to Queens, her mind still spinning. As she looked out at the flickering tunnel lights, she couldn't help but think about the consequences of her actions. Tomorrow would bring either hope or doom, or maybe both. But for now, she clung to a small sense of victory. She had no idea her words would soon become a viral sensation. When Sophia woke up the next morning, her phone was vibrating incessantly on her bedside table. She groaned, glancing at the clock, 6:30 a.m., an ungodly hour for a Sunday. Sliding her finger across the screen, she saw a barrage of text messages, missed calls and notifications from social media apps she rarely even opened. Her pulse jumped. What on earth was happening? She unlocked her phone to find a flood of messages, some from co-workers at Le Papillon, others from friends she hadn't spoken to in years, and even from unknown numbers. Words jumped out at her. OMG, you're trending. Are you okay? That was so brave. Call me ASAP. Her heart hammered as she scrolled through the social media. She was tagged in multiple posts. One particular video shaky footage from a patron's phone showed Ethan Caldwell berating her in the restaurant, then captured the pivotal moment when she uttered the sentence that left the room stunned. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." The clip ended with Ethan's outraged departure, followed by the applause that spread through the dining room. Already the video had hundreds of thousands of views on Twitter and Instagram, with comments pouring in at breakneck speed. Finally, someone stood up to that jerk billionaire, go Waitress, and respect. "I want to find her and give her a medal. Ethan Caldwell is a known tyrant. Good for her." There were detractors, too, who insisted Sophia was out of line, that a server should never speak to a patron like that, especially someone who could ruin their life. But the majority seemed overwhelmingly supportive. Hashtags like #HatYouCan'tBuy. Decency trended throughout the morning. Sophia felt dizzy with anxiety. She had never asked for this kind of attention. What if the owners of Le Papillon saw it and decided she was a liability? What if Ethan Caldwell launched a defamation lawsuit? She was just a single mom trying to make ends meet, not a freedom fighter ready to battle a tech titan. Still in her pajamas, she paced the narrow living room, while Kiki, still half asleep, wandered out of her makeshift bedroom. Rubbing her eyes, her daughter asked Mommy, "Why are you up so early?" Sophia plastered on a smile. "Don't worry about it, sweet pea," she said, kissing her on the forehead. "How about I make us some pancakes before we do anything else today?" Kiki's eyes lit up. "Yes, please, with chocolate chips." "Of course," Sophia said softly. While she whisked the batter, her phone continued buzzing on the countertop. She received a call from Marta, who sounded breathless. "You have no idea what's going on," Marta exclaimed. "The owners just called an emergency meeting with the entire staff for noon today. Rumor has it reporters are calling the restaurant non-stop trying to get your name. It's crazy." Sophia's stomach sank. "Do you think they'll fire me?" Marta hesitated. "I don't know. But I do know we're all rooting for you. Customers have been calling too, praising what you did. Hang in there." Sophia thanked her and set the phone aside, focusing on flipping pancakes as if her life depended on it. After breakfast, she dressed Kiki and brought her to her friend Lydia's place, who often watched Kiki when Sophia had short-notice obligations. She confided in Lydia about the situation, and Lydia, always the optimist, reassured her that everything would work out. It was with trembling hands and a racing heart that Sophia arrived at Le Papillon just before noon. A small throng of reporters and cameramen hovered outside the entrance, brandishing microphones and cameras. She recognized the logos of local news stations, and her chest tightened with dread. How had this spiraled so quickly? One of the reporters spotted her. Miss. Is it true you're the waitress who stood up to Ethan Caldwell? Can you tell us what happened? Sophia lowered her gaze and attempted to slip past them. She didn't want to make any statement that could worsen her situation. The maitre d' was at the door, ushering her in quickly. Good to see you, he murmured. Just head to the private dining room in the back. The meeting's about to start. Inside, every member of the staff was already seated. Bartenders, servers, chefs, bussers, and hosts. The tension was palpable. At the head of the room stood Franco Moretti, the restaurant's general manager, and Patrice Fontaine, the majority owner of Le Papillon. Sophia had only seen Patrice once before, during a special event. Patrice was a tall, elegant woman in her mid-50s with silver hair twisted into a sleek chignon. Her posture exuded confidence, and her cool blue eyes commanded the room's attention. When Sophia entered, heads turned and she felt a flush creep up her neck. She quietly slipped into a seat near the back. Franco cleared his throat and began, "Thank you all for coming in on short notice. As you're all probably aware by now, a video involving an incident at our restaurant last night has gone viral. While this has put our establishment under sudden media scrutiny, we need to address this situation professionally and collaboratively." He glanced at Patrice, who stepped forward. "Le Papillon has always prided itself on excellence," she said, her voice clear. "Not just in our cuisine, but also in our service. However, we also believe in treating our staff with dignity. We do not condone the mistreatment of our employees by anyone regardless of wealth or influence." A low murmur rippled through the staff. Sophia's heart fluttered at Patrice's statement. Was it possible that the restaurant's management actually stood behind her? Patrice's gaze scanned the room until it found Sophia. "Sophia Jenkins," she said. "Please come forward." A hush fell. Sophia's stomach knotted as she rose from her chair and walked toward the front of the room, aware that every eye followed her. Sophia Patrice began. "I've been informed of the details surrounding last night's event. We've all seen the footage that's been circulating. While we do not usually encourage public confrontations with guests, your response to Mr. Caldwell's verbal abuse has sparked a much-needed conversation about the respect and value of service workers. As the owner of Le Papillon, I believe it is crucial to stand by my staff when they have been attacked unjustly." Sophia swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Ms. Fontaine. I truly appreciate that. I never intended to cause a scene or bring negative press to the restaurant. You spoke truth," Patrice interrupted gently. "I've already been in contact with our legal team in case Mr. Caldwell decides to pursue legal action, which we doubt he will. The public sentiment appears to be in your favor, and any lawsuit on his part would likely cause him more damage in the court of public opinion." Relief coursed through Sophia. She hadn't realized just how tense she was until that moment. Does that mean I still have a job?" Patrice's lip curved in a wry smile. "Yes, Sophia, you still have a job. In fact, we'd like to highlight your dedication and poise amid extreme circumstances. However, we must be cautious with the media. We don't want to provoke Mr. Caldwell or inflame the situation. If you receive any press inquiries, direct them to our public relations department." "Understood." Sophia nodded, tears threatening to spill. "Yes. Thank you so much. I won't let you down." Patrice patted her hand, then addressed the staff. "For now, if any of you are approached by reporters, please refrain from giving statements. Direct them to Piro Kuho. We will release a formal statement soon." Let's remember that we're a team, and we will treat each other and our patrons with the utmost respect." The staff applauded quietly, and Franco ended the meeting shortly after. While a wave of employees came to congratulate or hug Sophia, she stood in a haze of relief and lingering anxiety. She'd been granted a reprieve, but she knew the story was far from over. Ethan Caldwell might still retaliate, and the world's attention was on her. Still, for the first time in her life, Sophia felt seen not as an invisible waitress to be stepped on, but as a person with a voice and dignity that could not be bought at any price. In the days that followed, Sophia's life transformed in ways she never could have anticipated. The formal statement issued by Le Papillon was measured and firm. They stood behind their employee, denounced harassment, and assured the public that they would continue to offer world-class dining without compromising the dignity of their staff. This approach ignited a flurry of supportive messages on social media. Her face, captured mid-sentence in that grainy cell phone video, became a symbol of standing up against toxic entitlement. Hashtags multiplied. Memes appeared. Late-night show hosts joked about Ethan Caldwell's meltdown. A satirical article in The Onion teased Billionaire outraged that Waitress expects basic courtesy, spends $10 million on etiquette book to prove point. Amid the frenzy calls and emails flooded the restaurant, many from journalists requesting interviews. Following Patrice's advice, Sophia politely deflected them all, forwarding inquiries to the PR department. She tried to maintain her normal routine, taking Kiki to school, working her shifts, dancing with the small group of students she taught on weekends. But it was surreal to navigate the swirling media storm while attempting to appear calm for her daughter's sake. Then one late afternoon, as Sophia was finishing an early shift, the maitre d' approached her with a bemused expression. "Sophia," he said, "there's someone here to see you. He says he's a friend of the owner and has a few words of support." Patrice approved it. She glanced around. "Who is it?" He jerked a thumb toward a discreet corner of the bar area where a tall man in a grey blazer stood with his hands clasped. He wore simple jeans and stylish sneakers, and though he tried to look incognito, the face was unmistakable. Sophia blinked, certain she was hallucinating. It was Bill Gates. She nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. The Bill Gates. The Microsoft co-founder, billionaire philanthropist and tech icon, just standing casually in Le Papillon's bar area, waiting to talk to her. Are you serious?" she breathed. The maitre d' nodded wide-eyed. "Yes." He said Patrice is an old acquaintance of his, and he heard about what happened here. Her mind spun. Why would Bill Gates want to talk to her? She was just a waitress. Gathering her courage, she approached him. Up close, he looked surprisingly down to earth, wearing a kind smile behind unassuming glasses. "Mr. Gates," she managed, her voice tinged with awe. I'm Sophia Jenkins." He extended a hand. "Nice to meet you, Sophia," he said warmly. "I hope I didn't cause you any trouble by dropping in. I just wanted to offer some words of encouragement. Patrice told me about the incident with Ethan Caldwell." He paused, adjusting his glasses. "Sometimes people with wealth forget about humanity. You, on the other hand, reminded the world that decency is priceless." Sophia's cheeks flushed. "I don't know what to say. Thank you, but it was all so unexpected. I really wasn't trying to make a point or go viral." He laughed softly. "That's often how these moments happen. But you should know I respect your courage. I've dealt with all kinds of corporate bullies in my career. People forget that power and wealth aren't excuses for bad behavior. When Patrice told me your story, I decided I wanted to meet you, if you were willing." She nodded, hardly believing this was real. I appreciate that more than I can express. But aren't you worried about being seen here? The press might." He lifted a hand, stopping her. "I'm not here to stoke any controversy. I'm just here to say that not everyone with money is like Ethan Caldwell, and you shouldn't let his actions define how you see people with resources. I also hope you won't let his threats intimidate you. There are many of us who admire your backbone. Honestly, I wish more people spoke up in situations like that." Before Sophia could respond, Patrice materialized, beaming. She greeted Bill Gates with a friendly kiss on each cheek, then turned to Sophia. "I see you two have met," she said, her voice filled with pride. "Sophia, Bill and I were chatting earlier about a potential philanthropic collaboration. We're looking into how we can help support workers' rights in the hospitality industry. We want to ensure that no one else has to face what you did." A whirlwind of emotions swirled in Sophia's chest. She, a small-town girl from upstate New York, who had come to the city with big dreams of dancing and was now a single mom scraping by, was being told that Bill Gates and Patrice Fontaine wanted to help people like her. It was surreal. "That's incredible," she finally managed. "I never imagined something like this could come out of that awful night." Patrice nodded. "Neither did we. But sometimes adversity shines a spotlight on issues that need addressing. We're going to use this momentum to push for better protections and respect for service workers. And we'd love for you to be involved in some capacity." Sophia blinked, overwhelmed. "Involved?" She couldn't help but laugh nervously. "I'm not really an activist. I told a rude billionaire he couldn't buy decency. That's all." Gates gave a small chuckle. "That one sentence may have changed more than you realize. You see, real social shifts often start with everyday individuals who speak up in one critical moment. And then everyone else realizes they're not alone in how they feel, that they too can speak out." Sophia felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of wonder and gratitude. "Well," she said shakily, "if there's anything I can do, share my story, give my perspective, I'd be happy to, especially if it helps others in my position." Patrice and Bill both smiled, exchanging glances. "We'll be in touch," Patrice said, with the details. "But for now, let's celebrate the fact that you're still here, employed, and you've put a spotlight on an important issue." The rest of the conversation felt like a dream. Bill Gates asked about Kiki, about Sophia's dance background, and how she balanced her hectic schedule. He listened intently, displaying genuine curiosity and kindness, exactly the opposite of Ethan Caldwell's brusque entitlement. When he finally left, the entire staff buzzed with excitement. Patrice made sure the encounter remained discreet, letting Bill slip out a side door to avoid the press. Within an hour, Sophia was on her way home, her head spinning. She still had to pick up Kiki from Lydia's and figure out what to make for dinner. But she carried a newfound sense of purpose, buoyed by unexpected allies. The confrontation with Ethan Caldwell had unleashed a wave of trials, but also a current of compassion and activism that she never imagined possible. Over the following weeks, the media frenzy gradually began to subside, replaced by thoughtful conversations about service industry standards. Sophia continued working at Le Papillon, though she noticed an uptick in curious customers who recognized her from the viral video. Some came purely out of curiosity, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous waitress. But many arrived with genuine admiration, leaving generous tips and encouraging words. One evening, Patrice held a private gathering at Le Papillon, inviting industry leaders, philanthropic personalities, and a few select journalists. The purpose was to launch a new initiative, Project Decency, a foundation aimed at promoting worker protection, anti-harassment training, and empowerment for service employees. Patrice introduced Sophia as the unexpected catalyst for the movement. Standing at the microphone in the softly lit dining room, wearing her black server's uniform, Sophia felt both terrified and exhilarated. She looked out at the crowd, chefs, restaurateurs, activists, even a few celebrities. Bill Gates stood alongside Patrice, nodding in quiet support. Sophia took a deep breath. "Good evening," she began, voice trembling slightly. "I never thought I'd be standing here speaking to a room of such distinguished individuals. A month ago, I was just a waitress trying to provide for my daughter and do my job well. But one night, everything changed. I spoke a single sentence to a powerful man, and it resonated far beyond my station. I've since learned that sometimes it only takes a moment of courage to highlight a systemic issue, one that affects millions of people in the service industry." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I don't stand here to vilify anyone, but I do want to remind everyone that respect is not optional. It's a basic human right. If we can create an environment where no server, cashier, janitor, or housekeeper ever feels powerless against harassment, then we've achieved something far greater than just a viral moment." Applause rose from the audience, gentle but heartfelt. A wave of warmth washed over Sophia, and she smiled, recalling the time she was too shy even to stand up to her dance instructors in college. Now she was speaking to a room filled with influential figures, urging them to promote decency. After the speeches concluded, the event transformed into a cocktail reception. Guests mingled, sampling hors d'oeuvres crafted by Chef Lemaire. Sophia found herself inundated with handshakes and business cards. A high-profile Hollywood actress, known for her activism, told Sophia, "I wish I had your courage when I was working as a waitress in my early days." An older restaurateur in a white suit nodded solemnly and said, "You reminded me why I got into hospitality in the first place, to serve and to respect people." Later, while sipping a tonic water by the bar, Bill Gates approached, giving her a reassuring smile. "Well done," he said. "You handled that speech like a pro." She laughed self-consciously. My legs were shaking the entire time. "Public speaking isn't exactly my thing." He raised an eyebrow, good-naturedly. "You seemed at ease. Maybe you're a natural." He then glanced at Patrice, who was engaged in animated conversation with a group of journalists, and lowered his voice. "I wanted to let you know that we, Patrice and I, are considering you for a more formal role in Project Decency. Obviously, this would be your choice entirely. We wouldn't want to pressure you, but we think your authentic voice is incredibly valuable." Sophia's eyes widened. "A role, as in working for the foundation?" He nodded. "Part-time or full-time, whatever you can manage. We know you have responsibilities with your daughter, and we'd never ask you to quit your job at Le Papillon if you don't want to. But we'd like you to be an ambassador, a spokesperson of sorts, traveling with us to speak about worker empowerment. We can provide compensation, of course, and we can adapt the schedule around your availability." Her mind reeled. That sounds amazing, but also terrifying. I've never done anything like that. He offered a kind smile. "Think about it. Talk it over with your loved ones. The offer stands whenever you're ready." With that, he gave her a friendly nod and slipped away. Sophia exhaled her thoughts, spinning. She recalled the day she started at Le Papillon, how anxious yet hopeful she felt. How far she'd come from that moment. Now she had opportunities she never dreamed of, born from a confrontation she never asked for, but one she bravely faced anyway. Across the room, Chef Lemaire caught her eye and winked. The memory of that infamous night flickered Ethan Caldwell shouting, belittling acting, as though he owned the restaurant and every soul in it. She remembered the single sentence she uttered that changed everything. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." In that moment, she realized she'd stumbled into something far bigger than herself. By the time she got home that night, Kiki was already asleep in bed. Sophia tiptoed in, gently kissed her daughter's forehead, and headed to her cramped living room, where she sank onto the couch. She looked around at the chaos dance shoes by the door, Kiki's crayons scattered on a table, a hamper of laundry waiting for her in the corner. It was a humble life, but it was hers. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen to see a notification, an email from Patrice, subject line, Project Decency Follow-up. Heart pounding, she opened it. Sophia. Thank you for your wonderful speech tonight. Enclosed is more information about the formal role we'd like to offer you. Please let me know your thoughts. We believe you can make a real difference. Warm regards, Patrice Fontaine. A swirl of hope and apprehension surged through Sophia. She set the phone aside, knowing she needed time to think. Could she truly step into such a role, traveling and speaking publicly? Was it wise to leave or reduce her hours at Le Papillon, an income she still desperately relied on? Yet if this opportunity allowed her to better provide for Kiki and help millions of other service workers, wasn't it worth considering? She couldn't help but smile, remembering her own words. You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency. That moment of spontaneous bravery had opened a door to a new horizon. She didn't know exactly where the path led, but she felt a surge of confidence pulsing through her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was discovering a purpose she never imagined. Life, she realized, had a funny way of turning a single sentence into an entire movement. And so ends the story of how a single mum, struggling to make ends meet, found herself at the epicenter of a culture-shifting moment in one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants. Sophia's bold stand against a powerful billionaire began as an unexpected clash, but evolved into a clarion call for respect and dignity in the workplace. From viral social media clips to chance encounters with philanthropists like Bill Gates, her journey shows us that one voice, no matter how humble, can spark real change. Will Sophia stay at Le Papillon or join Project Decency full-time? That's a decision she's still weighing. But one thing's clear, she'll never be the same timid waitress who accepted insults quietly. Sometimes it takes just one sentence to reveal who you truly are and transform the world around you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more dramatic, inspiring tales just like this one. Your support helps us keep creating content that uplifts and entertains. Let us know in the comments what you'd do if you were in Sophia's shoes. And remember, no matter how big or small you feel, your voice matters. The sound of tearing silk echoed through the hushed ballroom, sharper than a gunshot. All eyes snapped towards the source, Bianca Vance, her face a mask of cruel triumph, holding a shredded piece of emerald fabric. Before her stood a simple waitress, her uniform now hanging in tatters, exposing the delicate skin of her shoulder. "That's what you get for bumping into me, trash," Bianca hissed, her voice dripping with venom. The waitress didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. She simply met Bianca's gaze with an unnervingly calm fire in her eyes. The crowd murmured, unaware they were witnessing the spark that would ignite an empire's war. They saw a waitress being humiliated, but they had no idea she was Anya Sterling, and that her husband, the most powerful and ruthless man in the city, was watching from the shadows. The Valerius Grand Hotel's ballroom was a galaxy of artificial stars. Crystals dripped from the ceiling in shimmering chandeliers, casting a fractured diamond-like glow upon the city's elite. It was the annual Starlight Foundation Charity Gala, an event where fortunes were pledged on champagne-fueled whims and reputations were made or shattered between the amuse-bouche and the dessert course. Men in bespoke Tom Ford tuxedos, their wrists heavy with Patek Philippe watches, navigated the throngs of women poured into couture gowns that cost more than a suburban home. It was a jungle of silk and ambition, and tonight, Anya Petrova was merely part of the scenery. Her uniform was a crisp black tailor-made dress, simple but elegant, a stark contrast to the peacocking finery around her. A small, discreet earpiece was tucked behind her ear, her only link to the security detail she had insisted on leaving outside the main hall. To everyone here, she was just one of the dozens of catering staff hired for the evening, efficient, silent, and utterly invisible. And that was precisely how she wanted it. From her vantage point, near a towering floral arrangement of white orchids and hydrangeas, she had a clear view of the main dais. Her eyes, a unique shade of stormy grey, missed nothing. She tracked the subtle shifts in power, the whispered deals masked by polite smiles, the predatory glint in the eyes of corporate raiders circling their next target. This world was a game, one she knew how to play better than most, even from the sidelines. Her gaze eventually settled on a couple holding court near the center of the room. Damien Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Innovations, was a man who wore his ambition like a second skin. He had a classic, camera-ready charm, a sharp jawline, perfectly coiffed dark hair, and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. He was the golden boy of the tech world, his company's recent IPO, making him the city's newest, most talked-about magnate. Clinging to his arm, practically dripping in Cartier diamonds, was Bianca Vance. Bianca was the daughter of media mogul Robert Vance, and she moved with the entitled grace of someone who had never been told no in her life. Her gown was a fiery red Marchesa creation that demanded attention, its fabric shimmering under the lights as she laughed a tinkling artificial sound. She was beautiful, undeniably so, but there was a hardness in her sapphire eyes, a perpetual sneer playing on her perfectly painted lips that marred the image. Anya had been observing them for the better part of an hour. Damien was her husband's younger cousin, the festering wound in the Sterling family's side. The two branches of the family had been locked in a cold war for decades, ever since Damien's father had tried to stage a hostile takeover of the main family business, Sterling Enterprises. He had failed spectacularly, banished from the core empire, and left with a modest tech startup as a consolation prize. Damien had inherited that startup and his father's burning resentment, clawing his way back into the spotlight with a relentless, single-minded focus. Another glass of the Haut-9 Dom Perignon. Bianca snapped her fingers, clicking impatiently in the air without even bothering to look at the waitress who approached her. Anya kept her expression neutral, her movements fluid and professional, as she picked up an empty flute from Bianca's table. Right away, Madame Anya said, her voice soft and even. Bianca finally turned her head, her eyes narrowing, as she took in Anya's face. It was a fleeting, dismissive glance, the kind one gives to furniture. Yet for a split second, something flickered in Bianca's expression, a primal female assessment. Anya was not conventionally beautiful in the way Bianca was. Her features were stronger, her cheekbones high and sharp, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, simple knot. but there was a poise to her, an innate confidence in her posture that no uniform could hide. She was a still lake in a room full of crashing waves, and it was unsettling. "You're new," Bianca stated, not as a question, but as an accusation. "I don't recognize you. I was hired by the hotel for the event," Madame Anya replied, calmly refusing to be baited. Damien, ever the politician, gave Anya a cursory, charming smile. "Bianca, darling, let's not trouble the staff. We should go say hello to Mr. Blackwood." He placed a hand on the small of Bianca's back, but she shrugged it off, her eyes still fixed on Anya. "See that you're quicker this time," Bianca said, turning her back with a dismissive flick of her wrist. The insult was clear. "You are beneath my notice, but your service is still unsatisfactory." Anya retreated towards the bar, her composure a perfect, impenetrable mask. She wasn't angry. Bianca Vance was a gnat, a minor annoyance. This job, this disguise, was a necessity. Her husband, Adrian Sterling, was a man who collected enemies as easily as other billionaires collected art. He was a phantom, a whisper in boardrooms, a man whose true face was known to very few. His power was absolute, but silent. To protect him, and to protect herself, Anya had cultivated a life of near anonymity. Their marriage, a quiet ceremony, performed by a justice of the peace 2 years ago, was their most closely guarded secret. Tonight, Adrian was supposed to be in Zurich, finalizing a deal that would cripple one of his biggest rivals. Anya had taken the catering job as a way to observe Damien. Adrian had heard whispers that his cousin was getting reckless, making promises to dangerous investors that he couldn't possibly keep. Anya's sharp eye for detail and her ability to blend in made her the perfect reconnaissance tool. She could gather information unfiltered by the sycophants and yes-men who surrounded people like Damien. She returned with the champagne, placing it on the table with a steady hand. Bianca ignored her completely, now engrossed in a conversation with a portly man in finance. Anya began to move away, her mission for the moment complete. She had seen the desperation behind Damien's confident facade, the way his eyes darted around the room, constantly searching, constantly calculating. He was in over his head. That was the information she needed. As she turned to navigate through a cluster of guests, her path was suddenly blocked. Bianca Vance stood before her, her expression petulant. "Excuse me, madam," Anya said, attempting to sidestep. "You think you can just walk away when I'm talking to you?" Bianca's voice was low, but it carried an edge of steel. In reality, Bianca hadn't been talking to her at all. Anya paused, confused. "My apologies. I thought you were finished." "I'm finished when I say I'm finished," Bianca sneered. "I was watching you. You've been staring at my fiancé all night." The accusation was so absurd that Anya almost broke character. She had been watching Damien, yes, but as a target, not an object of desire. To Bianca, however, every woman was a potential rival, every glance a challenge to her sovereignty. "I assure you, madam, I was only doing my job," Anya said, her voice remaining placid. "Your job is to be invisible, not to ogle the guests." Bianca took a deliberate step closer, invading Anya's personal space. The scent of her expensive perfume, Jean Patou's joy, was cloying and overwhelming. "I know your type. You see a man with money, and you think you can bat your eyelashes and work your way into his bed. Let me tell you something. Damien is mine. A little gutter rat like you wouldn't even be a momentary distraction." The entire exchange was happening in a bubble of perceived privacy, shielded by the noise of the gala. But people were starting to notice. The conversation around them lulled slightly. Damien, seeing the brewing confrontation, began to move toward them, a look of weary annoyance on his face. He knew Bianca's temper. "Bianca, come on," he said, trying to take her arm. "You're making a scene." She started it. Bianca snapped, yanking her arm away. Her eyes, wild and furious, darted back to Anya. She needed a target for her misplaced insecurity, and the silent, composed waitress was the perfect one. "You think you're better than me, don't you, with your quiet little judgments?" Before Anya could respond, before Damien could intervene, Bianca's hand shot out. It wasn't a slap. It was something more deliberate, more humiliating. Her manicured fingers adorned with a massive sapphire ring hooked into the neckline of Anya's simple emerald dress, the dress she'd worn under her uniform for a quick change later. The fabric was delicate silk, a private indulgence. With a vicious tug, Bianca ripped it downwards. The sound was shockingly loud in the relative quiet that had fallen around them, a sharp, grating rip that sliced through the murmurs of the gala. For a frozen moment, no one moved. The torn emerald silk gaped open, exposing Anya's collarbone and the top of her shoulder in a jagged line. The uniform jacket she'd been wearing was now pulled askew, the damage beneath it stark and violent. It was an act of such calculated cruelty, designed for maximum humiliation. It wasn't just an attack on a waitress. It was a branding, a public declaration of status. I can destroy you, and you are powerless to stop me. Bianca Vance stood back, her chest heaving slightly, a triumphant, ugly smirk on her face. She held up the torn scrap of fabric like a trophy. There, she said, her voice ringing with satisfaction. "Now your dress looks as cheap as you are." A collective gasp went through the nearest onlookers. This was beyond the pale, even for the cutthroat world of the city's elite. Damien's face went from annoyed to horrified. This wasn't just a scene. It was a potential PR catastrophe. He grabbed Bianca's arm this time with force. "What the hell is wrong with you?" He hissed, his voice a low, furious whisper. But Anya didn't look at him. She didn't look at the shocked faces in the crowd or the pitying glances from the other staff members who were frozen in place, terrified of being drawn into the fray. She didn't even look at the ruined fabric of her dress. Her stormy grey eyes were locked on Bianca. There was no fear in them, no tears, no shame, no anger. There was only a profound, chilling calm. It was the calm of a dormant volcano, a placid surface hiding an immense, molten core of power. She didn't flinch. She didn't scramble to cover herself. She simply stood there, her posture perfect, her gaze unwavering, and let Bianca's pathetic victory hang in the air and rot. This unnerving composure seemed to infuriate Bianca more than any outburst would have. She had expected hysterics, a satisfying crumble. The waitress's stoicism was an act of defiance. "What's the matter?" Bianca taunted, her voice rising. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you too stupid to even realize what just happened? Go on, run to your manager. Cry. See what happens. I'll have you fired before you can even file a complaint. I'll make sure you never work in this city again, not even as a dishwasher." Anya finally moved. With slow, deliberate grace, she reached up and gently took the shredded piece of silk from Bianca's fingers. Bianca was so surprised by the move that she let it go. Anya looked down at the fabric in her hand, her expression unreadable. The dress had been a gift from Adrian, custom-made by a small, independent designer in Milan she admired. It was one of her favorites. A quiet pang of sadness went through her, but she walled it off. It was just a thing. Things could be replaced. Dignity once lost was much harder to recover. She folded the small piece of silk, neatly, her movements precise and unhurried. Then she tucked it into the pocket of her apron. Finally, she looked back at Bianca, and for the first time, she spoke in a voice that was no longer soft and subservient. It was clear, measured, and resonated with an authority that was utterly out of place for a waitress. "You are making a very serious mistake," Anya said. The shift in her tone was so abrupt, so complete, that it startled everyone who heard it. The deference was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact, delivered with the certainty of a physicist explaining the law of gravity. Damien felt a sudden, inexplicable chill run down his spine. He looked at the waitress, really looked at her for the first time. The uniform, the serving tray, the quiet demeanor. It was all a costume. Beneath it there was something else, something formidable. He didn't know what it was, but his instincts, honed in treacherous boardrooms, were screaming at him that Bianca had just kicked a hornet's nest the size of a skyscraper. A mistake. Bianca laughed, a shrill, brittle sound. Threatening me. Oh, this is rich. Do you have any idea who I am? I know exactly who you are. Bianca Vance, Anya replied, her voice still level. You are the daughter of Robert Vance. You have a trust fund valued at approximately $90 million, a media degree from a university your father endowed, and a reputation for being volatile and cruel. Your greatest accomplishment to date is being photographed at events like this one. The detailed clinical recitation stunned Bianca into silence. The crowd murmured their interest, now fully piqued. This was no longer just a socialite bullying a server. This was something else entirely. How? How do you know that Bianca stammered, her bravado faltering? Anya gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. That's not the important question, she said. The important question is, do you have any idea who I am? Before Bianca could formulate a suitably scathing reply, a new voice cut through the tension. It was deep quiet and carried an unmistakable weight of command that silenced the entire ballroom instantly. I believe that's an excellent question. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. A man was approaching, walking with an unhurried, predatory grace. He wasn't as overtly handsome as Damien. His features were sharper, more severe. He was taller, dressed in a flawless, custom-tailored dark charcoal suit, no tie, the top button of his stark white shirt undone. He wore no ostentatious jewelry, only a simple, elegant watch with a black leather strap. But power radiated from him, like heat from a furnace. He was the center of gravity in any room he entered, and right now the entire ballroom was caught in his orbit. Anya's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something relief, annoyance, love passed through her eyes. Damien Sterling's face went bone white. His blood ran cold. Of all the people who could have witnessed this debacle, it had to be him. Adrian Damien choked out his voice, barely a whisper. The man, Adrian Sterling, didn't even glance at his cousin. His eyes, the color of cold steel, were fixed on Bianca Vance. And then they moved to Anya, taking in the torn dress, her exposed shoulder, and her unshakable composure. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Adrian Sterling, the reclusive, almost mythical head of the vast Sterling enterprises, the man they called the Shadow King of Wall Street, had just entered the game, and he looked absolutely furious. Adrian Sterling's presence changed the very atmosphere of the room. The background chatter ceased completely. The string quartet faltered into silence, and the air crackled with a new, dangerous energy. He was a man who rarely made public appearances, preferring to pull the strings of his global empire from the seclusion of his penthouse office. To see him here at an event he would typically disdain as frivolous was a shock. To see him striding into the center of a tawdry confrontation was utterly unthinkable. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze a physical force. It swept over Bianca, and she visibly withered under its intensity. The sneering, confident socialite was gone, replaced by a frightened girl who suddenly understood she had wandered into a lion's den. His eyes then shifted to Damien, and the look he gave his cousin was one of pure, undiluted contempt. It was a look that said, "You are an embarrassment to my name." Damien swallowed hard, his face pale and slick with a sudden sweat. "Adrian," he repeated, trying to inject some confidence into his voice and failing miserably. We didn't expect to see you here." Clearly, Adrian replied, his voice a low baritone that was both smooth and menacing. He still hadn't looked at Anya directly, but his entire posture was protective, his body angled slightly, as if to shield her from the others. I was under the impression this was a charity event, a place for philanthropy, not for public displays of barbarism. Every word was precise, clipped and lethal. He turned his steely gaze back to Bianca, who looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. "You," he said the single word, cracking like a whip. "You tore her dress." It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. Bianca opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words failed her. The power dynamic had shifted so completely, so seismically, that her entire worldview had been shattered in the span of 30 seconds. This man wasn't someone she could intimidate, not someone her father's name could influence. This was a different level of power altogether, a primal, absolute authority she had never encountered before. It was an accident she finally managed to stammer the lie, flimsy and pathetic even to her own ears. Adrian's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth whatsoever. It was a chilling, predatory expression. "An accident," he repeated softly. "You accidentally hooked your fingers into her neckline and accidentally ripped it open. An impressive lack of motor control. Perhaps you should see a doctor." A few nervous titters rippled through the onlookers. The humiliation was exquisite, delivered with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Damien, seeing Bianca flounder, felt a desperate need to regain control. This was his event, his moment in the spotlight, and his cousin was hijacking it, turning it into a public execution. "Look, Adrian," he started, stepping forward. "This is just a misunderstanding. The waitress was being rude and Bianca, she overreacted. It's been handled. There's no need for you to get involved." Adrian finally turned his head to look at Damien properly. The sheer force of his focus made Damien take an involuntary step back. "Involved, Adrian," said his voice, dangerously soft. "You seem to be under the misapprehension that this is your affair to handle. You are also under the misapprehension that you are in any position to tell me what I should or should not do." He took a step closer to his cousin. "Let me correct both of those errors. Everything that happens to this woman," he gestured almost imperceptibly towards Anya, "involves me. And you, little cousin, will never be in a position to tell me anything." The possessive, definitive statement hung in the air, sparking a wildfire of speculation. Who was this waitress? Why would Adrian Sterling, a man who commanded armies of lawyers and executives, personally intervene for a member of the catering staff? The whispers started quiet and frantic. Was she a former employee, a distant relative, a secret informant? No one could fathom the truth. Anya, meanwhile, remained silent. She watched Adrian, a complicated mix of emotions swirling within her. She was frustrated that he had blown his cover. Their anonymity was their shield. But she was also undeniably moved by his immediate, unequivocal defense of her. He hadn't asked what happened. He hadn't waited for an explanation. He had seen her in distress and had come to her consequences. Be damned. She finally met his eyes, and in that silent, fleeting glance, a whole conversation passed between them. "Are you all right?" his eyes asked. "I'm fine," hers answered. "But you shouldn't be here." Too late, his gaze seemed to say, with a hint of grim satisfaction. Adrian turned his attention back to the mess at hand. His eyes fell on the torn dress again, and a muscle in his jaw clenched. He shrugged off his suit jacket, the movement fluid and elegant. The jacket was a masterpiece of tailoring worth more than most people's cars. He walked over to Anya, and with a gentleness that stunned the onlookers, draped it over her shoulders. It was far too large for her, but the gesture was so tender, so intimate, that it sent a fresh wave of shock through the ballroom. He was covering her, protecting her, claiming her in a way that was more powerful than any words. The jacket smelled of him, a clean, subtle scent of bergamot and cedarwood. It was a familiar comfort, an anchor in the storm. Anya pulled it tighter around herself, the expensive wool warm against her skin. Mr. Blackwood Adrian's voice boomed, summoning the flustered event organizer who had been hovering helplessly on the sidelines. A portly, balding man scurried forward, his face beaded with sweat. "Mr. Sterling, an honor." "Is there a problem?" "There is," Adrian said coolly. "My associate," he chose the word carefully, "has been assaulted by one of your guests. Her clothing has been destroyed. I trust the Valerius Grand Hotel has a protocol for such things. I also trust you have excellent security cameras." Blackwood's eyes widened in terror. A lawsuit from Adrian Sterling would not just bankrupt the hotel, it would erase it from the map. "Yes, of course, Mr. Sterling. Absolutely. We will handle everything. The police should be called immediately." "No police," Adrian commanded, his voice dropping again. "This will not be a media circus. This will be handled privately. But it will be handled. As for your guests," his eyes sliced back to Damien and Bianca, "I believe they were just leaving." Damien's jaw dropped. "Leaving? We're not leaving. I'm a platinum sponsor of this event," where Adrian corrected him, a chilling finality in his tone. "Your sponsorship is no longer required, nor is your presence. Get out." It was the ultimate power play. In his own world, Damien Sterling was a king. He graced magazine covers and rang the opening bell at the stock exchange. But in Adrian's world, he was nothing, a gnat to be swatted away. Humiliation burned in Damien's cheeks. He was being thrown out of his own party, in front of his investors and peers, by the man he hated most in the world. And all because his girlfriend had decided to bully a waitress. A waitress who, for some terrifying and unknown reason, was under the personal protection of the Shadow King. Bianca, finally seeming to grasp the magnitude of her blunder, grabbed Damien's arm. "Damien, let's just go," she whispered, her voice trembling. But Damien was trapped. To leave was to admit defeat, to crawl away with his tail between his legs. To stay was to defy Adrian Sterling, a man who had financially ruined nations for lesser insults. As he stood there, paralyzed by indecision, Adrian delivered the final devastating blow. He turned to Anya, his expression softening, almost imperceptibly, as he looked at her. "Are you ready to go home, darling?" he asked. The word darling dropped into the silence like a perfectly cut diamond. It was intimate, affectionate, and utterly unambiguous. It shattered every theory the crowd had been entertaining. She wasn't an employee. She wasn't an associate. Anya met his gaze and allowed a small, genuine smile to touch her lips for the first time that night. "Yes, Adrian," she said, her voice clear and strong. "I am." Adrian offered her his arm. Anya slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, leaving the oversized suit jacket draped over her shoulders. Together they turned their backs on the stunned couple and the speechless crowd, and began to walk towards the exit, an undisputed king and his mysterious queen, leaving a battlefield of their making. The revelation was about to come, and it would be more explosive than anyone could possibly imagine. As Adrian and Anya walked away, a tidal wave of whispers erupted in their wake. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so outlandish, so impossible, that no one dared to voice it aloud. The powerful, reclusive Adrian Sterling, a man rumored to be married only to his work and a common waitress. It made no sense. Yet the evidence was irrefutable, the raw fury in his eyes, the gentle way he covered her with his jacket, the casual, possessive endearment, darling. Damien Sterling stood frozen, his mind racing. He felt a cold dread creeping up his spine, a primal fear he hadn't felt since he was a child facing his father's wrath. He stared at the back of the waitress, now cloaked in his cousin's $1,000 jacket, walking with a poise that belonged in a royal court, not a hotel kitchen. Who is she? The question hammered in his skull. Bianca was the one who broke the spell. Her mind, unable to process the power shift, defaulted to its usual setting, arrogant denial. "Where do you think you're going?" She shrieked, her voice high and ragged. "You can't just walk away. That waitress works for the hotel. She needs to be fired." Security, her hysterical cries, only served to highlight her complete loss of control. A few guests exchanged looks of pity and disgust. She was a queen deposed, still shouting orders from a throne that had turned to dust beneath her. Adrian and Anya stopped just short of the grand ballroom doors. They didn't turn around. Adrian didn't even deign to look back. He simply paused, a silent final act of dominance, allowing the weight of Bianca's desperation to hang in the air and suffocate her. It was Anya who turned. She pivoted slowly, her movements fluid and deliberate. The oversized jacket slipped slightly, revealing the torn emerald silk one last time. Her face was serene, but her stormy grey eyes were alight with a cold, bright fire. She looked past the gawking crowd, past a shell-shocked Damien, and settled her gaze directly on Bianca. "He's right, Bianca," Anya said, her voice carrying across the silent room, amplified by the perfect acoustics. "You were asking the wrong question. You asked if I knew who you are." "I do. You asked if I had any idea who he is." She gestured with her head toward Adrian. "I do. But the question you failed to ask, the one you should have started with, is, who am I?" She let the question linger, a final test. Bianca just stared back, her mouth agape comprehension, still stubbornly refusing to dawn. Anya's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "You see, you assaulted a member of the catering staff. You destroyed her property. But you didn't do it in a vacuum. You did it at the Starlight Foundation Gala, an event which, for the last 5 years, has been the single largest beneficiary of the Sterling Family Philanthropic Trust." A new wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. The Sterling Trust was legendary, its endowments vast, and its influence immeasurable. And that trust, Anya continued, her voice gaining strength with every word, is managed by its chairwoman, a woman who prefers to remain anonymous, a woman who occasionally likes to work at these events to see firsthand where the money goes, and to ensure the organizations we support are running smoothly. Damien's heart stopped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a ghastly shade of white. He felt the floor drop out from under him. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. He knew the chairwoman of the trust was a closely guarded secret, known only as A.P. Sterling. He'd always assumed it was some elderly aunt, a holdover from a previous generation. Anya took a half-step forward, her presence suddenly immense. "You ripped my dress, Bianca. You called me trash. You threatened my livelihood." She paused, letting each accusation land with the force of a physical blow. "You did all of this in front of my husband." With that final explosive word, she turned back and placed her hand on Adrian's arm. Husband. The word detonated in the ballroom. The shock was palpable, a physical jolt that ran through every single person present. All the whispers, all the speculation, crystallized into a single, mind-bending truth. This wasn't a mistress or a secret employee. This was his wife. The invisible waitress was Anya Petrova Sterling, the lady of the Sterling Empire, the secret queen to the Shadow King. Bianca Vance made a small, choking sound. Her perfectly made-up face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. She hadn't just insulted a waitress. She had assaulted the wife of the most dangerous man in their world. She had committed social, professional, and financial suicide in one spectacular hubristic act. Damien felt like he was going to be physically sick. The full scope of the catastrophe crashed down on him. This wasn't just a family embarrassment. Adrian hated him. Adrian had been looking for a reason, any reason, to crush him and his fledgling company. And Bianca, in her infinite arrogant stupidity, had just handed him a declaration of war on a silver platter. She hadn't just ripped a dress. She had torn a hole in the hull of Sterling Innovations, and they were sinking fast. "Oh my God," someone whispered from the crowd. "That's Anya Sterling." The name, spoken aloud for the first time, seemed to take on a life of its own. Adrian finally turned his head, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. He surveyed the wreckage of his cousin's reputation, his cold eyes missing nothing. He looked at the terrified faces of investors who had backed Damien, now realizing they had bet on the wrong horse. He looked at the gossips and social climbers already composing the story they would dine out on for the next year. Then his gaze fell on Damien. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The message was crystal clear. "This is the beginning. I will ruin you for this. I will take everything from you, and I will enjoy every second of it." He turned back to Anya, his expression softening once more. "Let's go home, Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice laced with a deep, resonating pride. He guided her out of the ballroom, the crowd parting for them in a wave of awed, terrified silence. The grand doors swung shut behind them, leaving a tableau of devastation. Bianca Vance finally succumbed, her legs giving way, as she crumpled to the floor in a heap of red marchesa and ruined ambition sobbing hysterically. Damien Sterling didn't go to her. He stood rooted to the spot, his champagne glass slipping from his nerveless fingers and shattering on the marble floor. The sound barely registered over the roaring in his ears. It was the sound of his entire world, everything he had worked for, everything he had built, breaking into a million irreparable pieces. The Shadow King had come into the light, and his first act was to declare war. Damien knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that it was a war he could never win. The ride home was silent. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and white as the custom bulletproof Bentley sedan glided through the streets. Anya leaned her head against Adrian's shoulder, the adrenaline from the confrontation slowly draining away, leaving a profound weariness in its place. The heavy wool of his jacket was a comforting weight. Inside the climate-controlled quiet of the car, the chaos of the ballroom felt a world away. Adrian had one arm wrapped around her, his hand gently stroking her hair. He hadn't said anything since they'd left the hotel, his silence more comforting than any platitude. He was simply there, a solid, unshakable presence. "I'm sorry," Anya finally said, her voice a murmur against his chest. "I know this is exactly the kind of exposure you've always avoided." Adrian tightened his grip slightly. "Don't apologize," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Don't you ever apologize for what she did to you, or for what I did in response. My only regret is that I wasn't there sooner." His hand clenched into a fist for a moment before he consciously relaxed it. "When I saw her hand on you, I saw red Anya. All I could think about was tearing him and his entire world down." "You shouldn't have come," she said, though her heart warmed at his words. "I had it under control." He chuckled a rare, soft sound. "Oh, I have no doubt you did. I saw your face. You were about to dismantle her piece by piece without raising your voice. It's one of the things I love about you." But he tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his intense gaze. "You shouldn't have to. You are my wife. No one will ever lay a hand on you and get away with it. Not on my watch. The secret of their marriage had been a mutual decision born of necessity. Adrian's life was a minefield. His business dealings were aggressive and ruthless, earning him powerful enemies across the globe. Anonymity was his armor, and by extension, Anya's. She was his one vulnerability, the single pressure point his enemies could exploit. By living a quiet, unassuming life, she was not just safe. She was his hidden strength. Anya herself was no stranger to a life in the shadows. She was the daughter of a brilliant but disgraced Russian economist who had defected to the States with nothing but the clothes on his back. She'd grown up valuing intellect and resilience over wealth and status. She'd put herself through school earning degrees in finance and art history, and had met Adrian not at a gala, but in a dusty university library, where they were both researching the same obscure 17th century financial bubble. He was drawn to her sharp mind and her utter lack of interest in his name or his fortune. She was drawn to the quiet, brilliant man beneath the intimidating reputation. Their bond was forged in whispered intellectual debates and shared ambitions far from the prying eyes of the world. "This will complicate things," Anya said, thinking of the Sterling Trust and her anonymous work there. "It will be harder to operate now. We'll adapt," Adrian said simply. "Perhaps it's for the best. I'm tired of hiding you, Anya. I'm tired of not being able to show the world the brilliant, incredible woman I married." The animosity with Damien's side of the family ran deep. It wasn't just business. It was blood. Adrian's grandfather had built Sterling Enterprises from the ground up. He had two sons, Adrian's father, Richard, who was a visionary like him, and Damien's father, Edward, who was reckless and greedy. When the patriarch died, he left the company to Richard, giving Edward a generous but non-controlling stake. Edward, consumed by jealousy, saw this as an unforgivable slight. He spent years trying to undermine his brother, culminating in a disastrous, hostile takeover attempt funded by shady offshore lenders. The attempt failed, but it nearly destroyed the company. In the fallout, Richard, a man with a heart condition, suffered a fatal stroke. Adrian, then only 22, was forced to step in. He not only saved Sterling Enterprises, but built it into a global behemoth far beyond what his father or grandfather had ever imagined. He did it with a cold, surgical precision, cutting his Uncle Edward out of the family, and the business entirely leaving him, with only the small tech company that would one day become Sterling Innovations. Adrian never forgave his uncle for his father's death, and he saw that same reckless, entitled greed in Damien. He'd allowed his cousin to operate to build his own little empire as long as he stayed out of his way. But tonight, Damien hadn't just crossed a line. He had allowed his fiancée to attack the one person Adrian held sacred. For that, there would be no forgiveness. The car pulled into the private underground garage of their penthouse. As they stepped out, Adrian's head of security, a stoic man named Carter, approached them. Sir Madam Carter said with a respectful nod. "The initial fallout report is coming in. The story is already breaking on social media. The Waitress was a Sterling. It's the #1 trending topic globally." Adrian nodded, as expected. "What's the status of Vance Media?" "Their stock is already down 7% in after-hours trading on the Asian markets," Carter reported. "Your statement disavowing any future dealings with them has had the desired effect. Robert Vance has been trying to reach you. He's called 12 times in the last hour." "Let him sweat," Adrian said coldly. "And Sterling Innovations, panic," Carter said with a grim smile. "Their primary investors, the Jensen Group, and a consortium led by Kenji Tanaka, have both scheduled emergency calls with Damien Sterling for the morning. Our sources say they are looking for an exit clause. They know that a war with sterling enterprises is unwinnable. Anya listened, a familiar sense of awe and trepidation washing over her. When Adrian moved, he moved entire mountains. He wasn't just going after Damien. He was systematically dismantling the entire infrastructure that held his cousin's company aloft. They entered the private elevator that opened directly into their apartment. The penthouse was a testament to their shared tastes, vast, minimalist spaces, floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city, and a collection of priceless art that was both modern and classic. Anya slipped off Adrian's jacket and laid it carefully on a chair. The torn emerald dress felt like a relic from another life. "I'm going to change," she said. When she returned, dressed in simple silk pajamas, Adrian was standing by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring down at the glittering city below. He looked like a king surveying his domain. "He'll lose everything," Anya said, softly, coming to stand beside him. "Yes," Adrian said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "He will. He will lose his company, his investors, his reputation. That woman will leave him the second the money dries up. He will be exactly where his father was 30 years ago, with nothing." "Is that what you want?" she asked, searching his profile. He was silent for a long moment, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "What I want," he said, finally turning to face her, his eyes dark and intense, "is for him to understand that there are consequences. He grew up believing the world would bend to his will. His father taught him that. They thought my father was weak. They thought they could take what wasn't theirs. They disrespected our family, our legacy. And tonight, he stood by and watched while his pet viper attacked my wife. He showed the same cowardice, the same weakness of character that his father did." He reached out and gently traced the line of her collarbone, his touch feather-light over the skin that had been exposed by the torn dress. "This isn't about business anymore, Anya. This is about honor. He dishonored you, and for that, his entire world must burn." Anya saw the old pain in his eyes, the pain of a young man who had lost his father too soon, who had been forced to become a warrior to protect his family's legacy. Tonight hadn't created a war. It had simply fired the first shot in a war that had been brewing for a generation. She placed her hand over his. "Then we'll see it through," she said, her voice firm. "Together." Adrian's gaze softened. He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, possessive kiss filled with all the anger, fear, and love of the night. In that moment, they were not the Shadow King and his secret queen. They were just a husband and wife standing together against the world, ready for the storm they had unleashed. The dawn broke over the city, but for Damien Sterling and Bianca Vance, the world remained dark. The aftermath of the gala was not a slow burn, it was an inferno. By the time the sun was fully up, their names were toxic. The video, surreptitiously filmed by a dozen different guests on their phones, had gone viral. Every angle was covered. Bianca's sneering face, the shocking sound of ripping silk, Anya's unnerving calm, and the terrifying silent arrival of Adrian Sterling. The narrative was set in stone, a cruel, entitled socialite, and her weak-willed fiancé had publicly attacked a powerful, beloved philanthropist who was working incognito. Anya, the secret Sterling, was an instant folk hero. Bianca was the villain in a real-life fairy tale, and the public was screaming for her head. Bianca's world imploded first. By 7 a.m., she had been dropped by her modeling agency. By 8 a.m., 3 major brands, for which she was a paid ambassador, had publicly terminated her contracts, issuing statements condemning bullying and harassment. Her father, Robert Vance, a man who prided himself on his media savvy, was in full-blown panic mode. Vance Media's stock had plummeted overnight. Advertisers were pulling out. His own board was calling for his resignation for failing to control his daughter, whose actions now threatened their entire corporation. He had called Bianca, screaming at her with a fury she had never experienced. "You foolish, idiotic girl," he had roared over the phone. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just pick a fight with a waitress. You declared war on Adrian Sterling on my behalf. He's going to ruin us." The relationship between Bianca and Damien shattered just as quickly. After a night of bitter, screaming recriminations at Damien's penthouse, where she blamed him for not stopping her, and he blamed her for her monumental stupidity, the end was swift. "You have to fix this. Damien." She had cried her face, blotchy and swollen from hours of weeping. "Call him, apologize. Do something, fix this." Damien laughed a harsh, broken sound. "There is no fixing this. You don't fix a direct insult to Adrian Sterling. He doesn't accept apologies. He accepts total surrender and complete annihilation. My company, my life's work is over because you couldn't stand the thought of a pretty waitress breathing the same air as you. It was your fault. You were staring at her." Bianca shrieked, falling back on her initial pathetic excuse. That was the final straw. "Get out," Damien said, his voice dead. "Get your things and get out of my apartment. Now." "You can't throw me out," she screeched. "I'm Bianca Vance. You're a liability," he retorted, turning his back on her. "And I'm cutting my losses." For Damien, the situation was far more complex and far more terrifying. His 9 a.m. call with the Jensen Group was a bloodbath. They were invoking the reputational damage clause in their investment contract. They were pulling their funding effective immediately. The call with Kenji Tanaka's consortium was even worse. Tanaka, a man who valued honor and respect above all else, was personally insulted by Damien's association with the incident. "You have brought shame upon yourself, Sterling-san Tanaka," had said his voice, ice cold over the speakerphone. "We can no longer be in business together." By lunchtime, Sterling Innovations had lost over 60% of its market value. A mass exodus of talent began as key engineers and executives, smelling blood in the water, started sending out their resumes. The company was in a death spiral. Desperate, Damien did the one thing he never thought he would do. He drove to the Sterling Enterprises Tower, a monolithic black skyscraper that dominated the city's skyline, and begged for a meeting with his cousin. He was made to wait in the cavernous, intimidating lobby for 3 hours of public humiliation for a CEO who was used to being ushered immediately into any office he chose. Finally, he was summoned to the top floor. The office was larger than his entire apartment, a stark, minimalist space with a single massive oak desk and a breathtaking view of the city. Adrian was not behind the desk. He was standing by the window, looking out his back to the door. Adrian Damien began, his voice cracking slightly. "Thank you for seeing me." Adrian didn't turn around. "I'm not seeing you, Damien. I'm allowing you to speak to my back for 2 minutes. Your time started when the door closed. The cold dismissal was like a slap in the face." Damien swallowed his pride. He was here to beg. "Adrian, I am so sorry. For everything. What Bianca did was unforgivable. I should have stopped her. I was weak. I take full responsibility." "No, you don't," Adrian said, still facing the window. "You take no responsibility. You're just here because your little house of cards is collapsing. You're not sorry for what happened to Anya. You're sorry for what is happening to you." "That's not true," Damien insisted, his desperation rising. "I will do anything to make it right. I'll issue a public apology. I'll donate to the foundation. Name a price. Adrian. Anything." At that, Adrian finally turned. His face was a mask of cold fury. "A price," he repeated, his voice dangerously low. You think you can put a price on what you allowed to happen. You think you can buy forgiveness for the public humiliation of my wife." He walked slowly towards Damien, his presence filling the room, sucking all the air out of it. "Let me tell you what's going to happen. The Jensen Group and Tanaka's consortium have already sold their shares in your company. Guess who bought them? A cold dread seized Damien. You, Adrian, smiled, that chilling, mirthless smile. Through a series of shell corporations, of course. As of an hour ago, I am the majority shareholder in Sterling Innovations, and as the majority shareholder, my first order of business will be to call for a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. My second will be to liquidate the company's assets and shut it down permanently." Damien stared, his mind unable to process the words. Liquidate, shut it down, but why? The technology is worth billions. The patents alone. You could absorb it into Sterling Enterprises. Why destroy it because it's yours? Adrian said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Because I don't want your company. I don't want your patents. I want to watch you lose everything. I want you to feel the same helplessness my father felt when your father tried to destroy him. I am not just taking your company, Damien. I am erasing it. By the end of the year, it will be as if Sterling Innovations never existed. The sheer breathtaking cruelty of it left Damien speechless. This wasn't a corporate takeover. This was an execution. You can't, Damien whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. I can. Adrian stated the words, an epitaph. And I will. You have 60 seconds left. I suggest you use them to say whatever last words you have. You and I will never be in the same room again. Damien looked into his cousin's implacable steel-grey eyes and saw no mercy. He saw only the finality of a judgment passed down from on high. There was nothing he could say, nothing he could offer. He had lost. His father had lost the war a generation ago, and now he had lost it again. He turned without another word and walked out of the office, a broken man. As the heavy doors closed behind him, he heard Adrian pick up his phone. Carter Adrian's voice said, calm and clear, "Proceed with the liquidation, and get my wife on the line. I want to take her to lunch." 3 months later, the dust had settled. Damien Sterling was a ghost, his company liquidated, and his name erased from the world of finance. Bianca Vance, a social pariah, had been exiled by her own family to save their crumbling reputation. In their place, Anya Sterling had risen. No longer a secret, she embraced her role as the formidable chairwoman of the Sterling Trust, captivating the public, not with her story, but with her substance. At a press conference, she launched her masterwork, the Phoenix Initiative, a fund to empower women who, like her, had been underestimated. Adrian watched from the front row, his pride evident. The scandal had not broken them. It had solidified their partnership. That evening he revealed his final move. He had quietly acquired the disgraced Vance Media. His plan wasn't to destroy it, but to gift it to Anya. Imagine the voices you can amplify, he told her. The company that tried to silence you will now become your megaphone. Anya looked out at the city, no longer a shadow, but a queen with a newly acquired kingdom, ready to reshape the world. And so, a ripped dress became the catalyst for the fall of one empire and the glorious rise of another. Anya's story teaches us that true power isn't about the clothes you wear or the name you carry, but the strength and grace you hold within. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most to say. What did you think of Adrian's ultimate revenge? Was it justice, or was it too ruthless? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We love hearing your perspectives on these intricate tales of drama and redemption. If you were captivated by Anya's journey from the shadows into the spotlight, please don't forget to hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs a dose of empowerment and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable dramas. Your support helps us bring these stories to life. Thank you for listening.